Well, Taleb Rifai, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening, all the way from Amman in Jordan, and you've had a stellar career to date. I just looked at your resume; it's amazing. You started off with the BS in Architectural Engineering, a PhD in Urban Design in the USA, Professor of Architecture, goes into a whole load of stuff. I mean, amazing. But in terms of tourism, I think that what happened then, yes, let's have a look. In 2001, your portfolio in the Jordan government was expanded to include the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquity, and you've done an amazing job then. And then prior to assuming your post at the United Nations World Tourism Organization, where you're Assistant Director General, you worked for the International Labour Organization. I mean, it's incredible, really. So when did you become the Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization?
It was 2009, 2010.
Wow, okay.
That's where I became Secretary General of UNWTO.
Yeah, and I mean, we're looking at the shelves behind you, the photographs and the books, and I know that's your office, but I think that tells us of an amazing portfolio of things that you've undertaken. And you're currently a member of the Advisory Council, interesting, of Airbnb, I saw, an ambassador for the World Travel and Tourism Council, member of the Board of Trustees, Mediterranean. It just goes on. So sorry, you were just telling me about your life as the Secretary General of the UNWTO.
No, I was just saying that these are photographs of 148, 49 heads of states and heads of governments. So I visited. They're all displayed on this wall. Yes.
100 and how many? 48?
48.
Goodness gracious me. Let me ask you, which one, this is a difficult question now, Taleb, which one impressed you most?
Which is your most favorite child? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I don't answer.
Yeah, I don't blame
each
you.
Each one of them has a story. That's what matters.
All right.
I look at these photographs and their stories. Yes.
Let me ask you of a story that sticks in your mind.
Yeah. President of the Philippines, for example, Aquino.
Yeah.
The one before the current one. I was scheduled to see him at 2 o'clock, let's say. I was there at 1:45 at the Royal Palace, at the Presidential Palace. The minister was not there, was delayed in traffic.
Yeah.
I could not go in until the minister came. So we were half an hour late for the meeting. I came into the meeting very embarrassed because I was late for seeing the president for half an hour.
Yeah.
He was very kind, very nice. He was very apologetic. I was apologetic. He was very accommodating. He said, "Don't worry, I know what's happening." Then suddenly he asked me what are the things we should do to improve our tourism still. So I told him 2 things. 1, improve your visa situation.
Yeah.
2, you should improve your connectivity. He said, visa situation, what do you mean? We have a good visa system. Who told you we don't? He suddenly became very nervous, very defensive.
Yeah.
I said, I'm sorry, Mr. President. I didn't mean to offend you.
Yeah.
But if you think that that's offensive, I take it back. I'm glad to hear that you are. Okay. A week after that, I was in ITV in Berlin. I saw the minister coming from a distance. He was coming in very, very cheerful. He hugged me and kissed me. I said, "Oh, you're still minister after all what happened." He said, "You can't believe what happened. What happened is after that meeting I had with the president was residing over his cabinet. He said, I want to know exactly what the story is about visas. I've been told that there is a problem there." He said he took decisions that were unprecedented in opening up. So that's how the story goes.
Wow.
Sometimes little things, little comments like this may irritate them, but they become aware of that.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me, the UNWTO, a lot of people watching this will not understand exactly what the role of the United Nations World Tourism Organization is. And if there's anybody that knows it well, it's going to be you because you're Director General for quite a long time. What does the UNWTO do, and what's its relevance in the world today?
It is supposed to be representing all the governments of the world when it comes to travel and tourism. Our first objective was to raise the awareness and consciousness of governments on tourism, and the importance of tourism, because tourism is not taken seriously in many parts of the world, unfortunately. So we embarked on that. But what it's supposed to do now, under the current circumstances, it's supposed to bring the world together. For example, if I were there now, I would bring in, calling for a meeting for all ministers of tourism and ministers of health, maybe even prime ministers.
Yeah.
Tell them you're not leaving this room until you agree on something, some kind of procedures. Because it's the only platform that can provide that. Unfortunately, today, each government is working on its own. There is no unified system. So the multilateral system altogether is failing us. Look at the EU, for example. Even the United States not united anymore. Each state is acting on its own. The UN system altogether is not providing leadership, unfortunately. The EU, for example, which was always a good example. You have countries that are insisting on quarantines. Other countries are wanting to have vaccination passport. Third country in the same region, close to each other, is demanding only 72 hours testing. So all of this needs to be unified. We need to bring the people together. If I were there now, I would bring them, everybody, and tell them, you're not leaving this room until you decide on what you want to do. No matter how high the standards are, no matter how strict you are, you have to agree on one system only. Because the world would not move unless the world is unified. That's the nature of travel and tourism. Travel and tourism connects people and place. You cannot do something, no matter how good the job is that you do on your own. If you're doing it alone, it's not going to work. That's my point.
So who are the delegates to the UNWTO that would be sitting there if you were today saying, right, we're not leaving the room until you fix this, until we have some sort of consensus? So who would the delegates be? And are they influential enough in governments back in their home country to get that sort of process or protocol in place?
Normally, it would be ministers of tourism.
Okay.
But under current circumstances and the rising importance of travel and tourism, you could include ministers of health, you could include ministers of finance, you could include even prime minister. You as a UN delegate, as a UN organization, have the right to invite at any level. That's what I would have done.
Excellent, good. Look, and I think the situation globally, you're quite right, is that there's so much conflict, if you like, around the world in terms of who's allowed to go where and what and how. And, you know, there's been a lot of criticism in Australia and a lot of support for Australia's policy, which some people describe as Fortress Australia, not allowing international visitors in and not allowing Australians to travel. I don't want to, you know, sort of ask you an embarrassing question, but do you have a view on Australia's current position?
Of course, I do. I respect Australia very much. I think Australia is doing a good job. The problem is it cannot do it alone. No matter how good a job it does it alone. It doesn't do it with its surroundings. With Malaysia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Singapore, and all the surrounding countries. It won't work. Because I tell you, even if they insist on vaccination, to take the world 5 years to vaccinate 70% of the world population, you can't really turn this into a game of those that can and those that cannot. You can't vaccinate Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, and not vaccinate Africa, for example. Who's going to travel where? It's not a game. So you need to rely more on testing. I think testing is a very good procedure. Make it more available, more affordable, more available, and more affordable. So anybody that enters any country, including Australia, should have been vaccinated or tested 72 hours before and testing upon arrival. That's what I would do. But that does not mean anything unless the whole country, the whole region is agreeing on that. That's the problem. Australia is doing a great job on its own. But any country that's doing something on its own alone now does not work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%. It's extremely difficult. And I mean, you know, when you think about the world today or think about Australians, even if Australia did decide, and, you know, it appears that in some ways that the government is making policy as it's on the hoof, as it were, or on the run, one day saying the borders will remain closed until 2022, end of 2022. And then saying, oh, well, if people are vaccinated, they may be able to travel overseas to visit family and stuff like that. It's very confusing for people. And also the rollout in Australia of the vaccination, even within Australia, has been terribly slow, with a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to wait and see how it goes. Whereas we know that, okay, in places like this, vaccination is critical. But you quite rightly say, as a Western nation, we should be also helping the myriad of other countries that A, can't afford, and B, don't currently have vaccinations. Otherwise, the world, it's not an appropriate place. So, and as you know, the tourism industry generally, globally, if we look at Indonesia and we look at Bali, it's collapsed. Phuket Island has collapsed, and people are in poverty as a result of it.
Look, I'm not against vaccination at all. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm against countries that can have the means to vaccinate and others that don't have the means to vaccinate, because people are going to visit each other after all.
Yeah.
So you need the whole world to be harmonized on this.
Yeah.
I think a passport should be given for vaccination and for testing as well.
Yeah.
Don't over depend on vaccination only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Testing is good. Testing is good. If you test people very often and make testing affordable and available, that would do the job. That would do the trick. Because Australians are going to travel now, even if they vaccinate 70-80% of Australians.
Yeah.
They're going to travel to countries that are not vaccinated. What do they do?
Yeah, that's right.
Or people from countries that...
Yeah, that's right. Unless the Australian government, which has a track record of telling people what to do, says, well, you can only go to these countries and these countries and these countries, which is going to be extremely difficult to police and extremely bad for those countries as well, that they're isolated from it. Yeah.
Very discriminatory.
Yeah, very. Let's move across to another topic, not far away from you in Amman and in Jordan. And we have the situation at the moment with Israel and Palestine. So, for example, Royal Caribbean, who were going to have a ship based in Tel Aviv, have already pulled that ship. What impact do you think that's going to have on tourism in the Middle East?
It's going to have a big impact, not just on tourism, on the entire way of life.
Yeah.
I think this conflict has reached a point where there is no solution unless the Israelis come to terms with the fact that occupation is occupation.
Yeah.
You can't just keep blaming one party and say they are the ones that are to blame on this thing. Now, the situation here is bad to start with because COVID has hit us.
Yeah.
In Israel, for example, they were very discriminatory about vaccination. They vaccinated only Israelis.
Oh, really?
Israelis.
Wow.
Yes, they did not vaccinate anybody under occupation. They are in charge of the occupation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is going to backfire because people interact with each other whether you like it or not, no matter how many walls you build.
Yeah.
So I can see that the situation is coming to an end now. Finally, the world is beginning to realize that it's not just a matter of self-defense. Self-defense is one thing, but defense for everybody is important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, look, I agree with you 100%. And it's going to be very challenging how this plays out within Israel and in Palestine, and what's going to happen in the future. Let's move back to the UNWTO for a second. So in your time as the Director General, Secretary General or Director General? I can't remember which.
Secretary General.
Secretary General, lovely UNWTO title there. What do you think was your biggest achievement at that time in your role and your senior role?
Thank you for asking this question. I think the most important thing we did there is raise awareness about the importance of travel and tourism.
Yeah.
You need to go beyond ministers of tourism. You need to go to heads of states and heads of governments to talk to them, make them understand that this is 10%, over 10% of world GDP.
Yes.
1 in 10, 1 in 11 people of the world work in travel and tourism. They don't realize this. So what I did when I was there, I cooperated with WTTC, David's council at the time, as head of WTTC. And we visited so many countries. That's how I got all these pictures for all these heads of states. Visited each and every one of them and told them how important tourism is.
Yes.
Because the Minister of Tourism is appointed sometimes just to fill in, not as a major minister. So he doesn't have the power nor the ability. He needed the support of heads of states.
Yeah.
So the most important achievement we did is we addressed the heads of states directly on this thing. I think that's the most important part. Today, this is an easier job because the world now realizes how important travel and tourism is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it stopped completely. At the time, it was not.
Yeah. No, look, absolutely right. And I mean, when you think about it, the actual hiatus that's been caused in a major global industry where it has literally come to a stop. And even here in Australia, whilst we have, the borders closed and all that sort of stuff, so people are saying, oh, well, domestic tourism has taken over. It hasn't, because international tourism is significantly more valuable to the Australian economy than domestic tourism. And therefore, a lot of operators in Australia are missing the international visitors. And of course, Australians want to travel overseas, and yet at the moment they're being stopped. Now, just in terms, I was just looking again at your, one of the most important roles. You're the chairman of the International Tourism Investment Conference, but I like this one. I've done some work with the Institute for Peace Through Tourism, IIPT, with the guys here in Australia and the global chairman. How important do you think that peace through tourism is in this challenging world that we exist in today?
It's the most important part, because there is nothing more effective than people rubbing shoulders with each other to create peace and understanding. We have many deficits in this world: deficit of income, a deficit of technology, but the most important deficit is that of tolerance and understanding. There is nothing more important, nothing more powerful than people visiting each other, rubbing shoulders, having dinner with each other, to break down those barriers. When you visit some people, you have dinner with them, you listen to their music, you cannot have any negative feelings about it. So it's very, very important in peace. And that's a political issue. And this is what heads of states and heads of governments must realize: the importance of travel and tourism, not just economically, even politically and diplomatically. It's very, very important. But just to go back to the issue we started with on Australia and the travel, domestic tourism. Domestic tourism, I always say, it's not like international tourism. It does not bring in hard currency. It does not improve the balance of trade. It's very important because it gets people to know their own country. In developing countries, that's very important. You can't treat tourists as if they're coming from Mars. You have to interact with them. Therefore, it's important as a matter of principle now to have people enjoy their own country before anybody else enjoys it from outside. You don't have that problem in Australia or in Europe or in the United States. 70 to 75% of traffic is domestic travel. But in other countries around the world, it's very, very important to boost the importance of domestic travel. We don't even have statistics on domestic travel. When we talk about tourists, we only talk about blonde people with blue eyes coming in from somewhere, staying in a resort, being served by the local. That's not going to work. That's not sustainable at all. In India, for example, Hyderabad, there was a big 5-star hotel built in an area. It was poor around it. In a moonless night, the residents of that area attacked this hotel and put it on fire. Because you can't have 5-star hotels built in 3-star communities. You have to interact. And the one thing about this crisis is boosting the profile of domestic tourism. Domestic tourism is very important to me. It's a matter of principle. No country that's not visited or enjoyed by its own people can or should be enjoyed by anybody. It's from outside. First, you start with your own people, and then you go outside. That's what I'm...
Absolutely. You're now, you're not Secretary General of UNWTO now, but I'm sure that your mind, and I know from other people that know you, and including Stephen Morton here at Global Travel Media, I bet your mind hasn't stopped ticking, okay? And you have some future ambitions in tourism. I mean, you talk very, and I think you've done a great job in terms of getting tourism onto the agenda with many, many governments. I think some governments are still lagging behind in their appointments of tourism ministers and haven't quite recognized the value of tourism. But for you personally now, what are your future ambitions, and how do you think, I mean, as you personally, and then the bigger world we all live in, what is the future of tourism post-COVID?
It's a big future. But let me start by saying the following. I spent half of my career working 20 some years. I don't give a damn about tourism. What I care about is what it does to people, how it affects their lives. That's more important than anything else. So what I'd like to do now is how to affect people, how to make this world a better place through tourism or through other means. Tourism is a vehicle, no more. Tourism is an important element. But the important thing is how to be conscious about the livelihood of people. It's not just life that matters. It's a livelihood, living in dignity, prosperity, is important for everybody around the world. I want to leave this world a better place than I inherited.
Wow.
For sure.
That's a big objective, Taleb, but I think that you're the sort of person that's going to achieve that in your retirement, which I think I think it's retirement with a small R. I think you're going to carry on working and fulfill your ambitions. But look, Taleb Rifai, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today. In a world of a world of conflict and a world of challenges at this point in time, and I'm sure that you're going to continue your excellent work in improving the lot of people. And I think you're absolutely right. Everything else is a vehicle, and tourism and travel is a vehicle, but it's people that are important. Taleb Rifai, thank you very much indeed for your time.
You're welcome, John. Thank you for
this
opportunity. Thank you, my dear. Bye. Bye.